From Deloitte Tax, welcome to the Tax News and Views podcast. In this podcast series, we talk to specialists from Deloitte about the latest business issues and developments. I'm Carrie Falkenhayn, your host for Tax News and Views. And joining me today for a special policy edition is Jonathan Traub. Listeners are likely familiar with John's insights on policy matters, given his role on the Hill prior to joining Deloitte. So welcome, John. Good to talk to you again.
Always a pleasure, Carrie.
So when we last got together, we talked about the prospects of enacting the Build Back Better bill, which Democrats originally hoped to pass by the end of 2021. And that obviously did not come to pass because of Senator Joe Manchin, who has said he will not support the legislation, at least not in its current form. So maybe you could talk about what does he want?
Well, that's a question that I and thousands or maybe millions of other people would love to know the answer to. He's been pretty clear about things he doesn't want. He doesn't want a bill that's too big. He doesn't want a bill that contributes too much to inflation. He doesn't want a bill that contributes to the national debt. He wants to take out some pieces he thinks could move in other packages. He's been a little bit more circumspect about what he would support, and I think that's been the challenge for Democrats to understand that the passage of BBB rests on the decisions made by Senator Manchin, and they're sort of hoping that he will at some point make very clear not just what he's opposing, but also what he's supporting.
And there's other issues, right, that our government is focused on right now. Do you think those other issues are going to crowd out Build Back Better in terms of attention?
In the short term, the answer is yes for a number of reasons. Currently, Congress is working on passing a bill to keep the government funded. Government funding expires on February 18th. Congress is trying to have a temporary extension of that while they work on a long-term plan. There's been bipartisan negotiations around updating the Electoral Count Act of 1887. There was House passage last week of a bill to address competitiveness issues vis-a-vis China. We have an upcoming vacancy in the Supreme Court, which is attracting a ton of attention in D.C., and we certainly have a possible response from Congress to a incursion, if there is one, into Ukraine by Russia. So these are all things that at the short term are pushing BBB to the side. And honestly, another thing pushing BBB to the side that we should mention is last week we learned that New Mexico Democratic Senator Ben Ray Lujan suffered a stroke and is in a hospital. All reports are that he's doing quite well and is expected to make a full and complete recovery. But he is not going to be able to be in D.C. at least the next 3 to 6 weeks, we think, maybe longer. And as long as he can't be in D.C., Democrats can't bring to the floor bills which are going to pass with just Democratic votes, since they would have only 49 Democrats able to vote, less than the 50 Republicans that would be able to vote against them. So it creates a scheduling complexity for Leader Schumer, and certainly suggests at least that the floor action on BBB has to be paused while we wait for the recovery of Senator Lujan.
So there still is a path forward, despite a number of challenges. Maybe just talk a little bit in terms of what we think might happen from a tax side. My understanding is Senator Manchin's concerns aren't really around the tax revenue raisers, right? It's more on the spending side. But what are some of the tax issues that might still need to be resolved?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Carrie. Most of the time when we deal with big tax and spending bills, there's a lot of controversy about how to raise the revenue, but less controversy about how to spend it. And this is really the reverse of that. While there is not a lack of controversy about some of the revenue-raising items, they are far less controversial, especially among the members at this point, than how they spend the money. So some of the issues Senator Manchin's identified is he's got concerns about whether we should have an expanded refundable child tax credit. He's got some concerns in the clean energy space around whether to provide larger tax credits for union-made electric vehicles vis-a-vis non-union-made vehicles. There's also a direct pay provision which allows companies to, without taxable income, to claim tax credits for creating renewable energy. He's got some concerns around the size of the direct pay program. And then Democrats remain at odds internally about how to deal with the issue of the state and local tax deduction cap. We know There are some Democrats who said no SALT, no deal, but other Democrats are saying this is a big windfall for the progressive, for the wealthy, and we're not doing that for lower income families. So that remains a vexing challenge for Democrats. But for the most part, and then look, it's not to say there aren't some controversy around the revenue raising side. A lot of companies have expressed real concerns about the 163N changes to interest deductibility. There are concerns around the international rules for sure, but the bigger controversies, as you noted, Carrie, are really around how to spend the money, not how to raise it.
So maybe you could talk about, is there a deadline to enact Build Back Better, and then how that deadline might impact effective dates of some of the tax revenue raisers?
Yeah, there's only one really true binding deadline on Build Back Better. That is the reconciliation instructions that allow them to pass the bill through the Senate with only 50 votes, or 51 votes if you count the tie-breaking vote of Vice President Harris. Those instructions expire at the end of September, the end of fiscal year 2022. Congress has always had deadlines that force them to act on difficult problems, but the calendar, most of those deadlines occur in the second half of the year, the August recess, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and really Democrats don't have the luxury of waiting that long. There has been a hope that Democrats will be able to use the upcoming March 1 presidential address to the State of the Union as a action-forcing event. Obviously, with Senator Lujan being absent due to illness, there will not be votes on it by March 1, but many Democrats hope that they can use that as a inflection point to get members to sort of focus on making decisions around what they would be willing to pass or able to pass later on. And it does raise, obviously, the longer this goes and continues to drag out, it does raise questions, Carrie, as you sort of note, around effective dates. Everything we hear from sources on Capitol Hill is Democrats would like to keep the effective dates as crafted in the version of Build Back Better passed by the House back in November. As we get further and further into 2022, though, it's harder to do that. Democrats will make the argument that, look, there are most provisions that are most controversial in the bill, like the 163N change, like changes to the book minimum tax, like GILTI, are all effective in 2023 or beyond. And there's only a handful of provisions effective 1/1/22 or earlier. And for the most part, taxpayers were on notice that these changes were coming. So it really wouldn't be, a surprise to them. And Congress has had the power and has in the past from time to time enacted tax increases retroactively. However, the longer we go into 2022, the less tenable that becomes. And when you're dealing with a 50-50 Senate, if even a single Democratic senator says, you know what, I'm not comfortable with making these changes retroactively, Democrats would have to change the effective dates and move them forward. Again, Democrats hope to keep them as is, although the longer we go, the more likely it is we'll see them move forward.
Well, in addition to the revenue raisers, there were a number of expiring provisions that were extended as part of Build Back Better, as well as changing the effective date for certain sections of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. What do you think the prospects for those provisions is now?
Yeah, so the one people really pay a lot of attention to is the Section 174 change on R&D amortization rules. And we've seen some chatter in the last couple of weeks that advocates of maintaining prior law, meaning you could fully expense those costs in the year incurred rather than amortizing them over a couple of years, are sort of venue shopping for a place they could put that provision if Build Back Better isn't moving. We know, Carrie, Congress has gotten in a really lamentable habit of doing extenders on a retroactive basis. As much as we all complain from a tax policy perspective about how bad it is to do these things retroactively, Congress, has sort of gotten this lazy habit of doing it, unfortunately. So we do see on the horizon at least one place where Congress may deal with some of these expiring provisions. If there's a big spending bill done for the full year, it is possible that would carry some tax pieces. The other place we're watching is, as I mentioned last week, Congress passed a bill to address competitiveness vis-a-vis China. And there is a small revenue title in that package. And there is sort of a question as to whether or not that maybe that could be expanded in negotiations between the House and Senate to include at least a delay of 174. That is certainly possible. I'm not exactly predicting it at this point, but it's something we're all going to watch closely. There will be a fierce lobbying over that as we get closer to the point at which the Congress is ready to act on a final version of the China competitiveness bill.
And do you think Congress feels any pressure by the enactment of these 174 and 163J provisions and the pressure it puts on taxpayers in terms of, projecting their effective rate for Q1 and things like that?
The answer is yes, they are aware. They certainly hear from enough of their constituents that this is a problem. They are, obviously it made it into the 174 change, at least made it into both the House passed version of Build Back Better as well as a version the Senate had hoped to move but did not able to do so before the end of the year. So they're certainly aware of the concerns. They're certainly hearing a lot about it. Whether it's enough to motivate them to act outside of BBB, that's a little tougher.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly creating a number of challenges for tax departments, not knowing exactly how to build that into their plans. I guess they have to build it into their plans till anything.
Yeah, and as I said, Carrie, Congress has gotten in the really bad habit of doing these kind of things on a retroactive basis. And they hear all the time from taxpayers and companies how it doesn't really help to provide an incentive retroactively, how it creates uncertainty and those kind of problems. But it has so far not consistently moved the needle in forcing Congress to deal with these things on a timely basis.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, John, for that update. I look forward to our next discussion. If people would like more information, you can subscribe to the email version of Tax News and Views on Deloitte.com. And you can also connect with John directly on LinkedIn. And I hope you tune in here for future policy editions. So in the meantime, thank you all for listening, and I hope you continue to be well.